meeting. The town council has been empowered through our redevelopment zone ordinances to conduct ourselves as the Edenton Redevelopment Commission. And to that end, we have an offer to purchase property within one of our redevelopment zones on North Oakham Street. Anne Marie, would you break that down for us, please, ma'am?
Yes, sir. I'm happy to. We have been, or actually Elizabeth Bryant, our planner, and Hood Ellis, our town attorney, have been working with a willing seller, a person who owns a very historically significant piece of property on East Gale Street, 133 East Gale Street. And they are willing to sell the property for the appraised value, which is $29,000. And Hood has prepared a offer to purchase and contract, which if the redevelopment commission votes to authorize that, then Elizabeth and Hood will extend that to the property owners, and we'll get the acquisition process rolling. And then once the town formally owns the property, we'll be working on putting the covenants on that hopefully you will approve later in the meeting, and then working on putting the property up for sale. And we think it will be a property that will be extremely interesting to people that are redeveloping property in and around the neighborhood redevelopment zone.
Very good. Council members, anybody have any questions? I mean, this is a point in time that we've been working to get to for quite some time with the redevelopment zones that we have in town, and this is another property that's now available for us to purchase. So unless anybody has any questions, I'd like to entertain a motion that we go ahead and accept the offer to purchase as just described.
So moved. Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
I just think it's so great to be at this point, and with the covenants on the agenda tonight, I think we're going to really make a difference in that neighborhood for the residents that live there.
I agree. Further comments? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Okay, that carries. And with that, the Redevelopment Commission has completed its agenda for tonight, and I'll now call the regular meeting of the Edenton Town Council to order, and that is our scheduled meeting for the month of November. So following our agenda tonight, if you would please stand and join me in the pledge, after which Councilman Poole is not here. Steve, would you offer an invocation for me? Okay, thank you. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eternal Father, we thank you that you allow us to be here tonight to be about the business of the people of Edenton. We pray that you will be in the midst of this meeting, guide our minds and our thoughts, Father, and certainly guide the decisions that we make. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
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 Thank you, sir. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of special meeting July 22nd and regular meeting October 8th.
So moved. Second.
Any questions, comments, additions, corrections? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no. All right. And that brings us to our public hearings for this evening. The first public hearing is case number TA 19-03 related to amendment to our UDO ordinance to deal with, or certainly listen to at this point. I know there's been a lot of public hearing and comment made at the planning board level, and there's there's an amendment that's before us tonight that we would like to hear from the public about relative to short-term rentals. Anne Marie, anything you would like to add? Otherwise, I'll ask Elizabeth to present the staff report, and we'll get on with it.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Well, you are exactly right. We have been working on this for quite some time. I think Nancy Nichols reminded me earlier this evening that we first started talking about this in perhaps 2017. So it's been a long process of hard work. And just to give you a brief background, you directed staff to investigate potential ordinances that could regulate short-term rentals, or in lay terms sometimes referred to as Airbnbs, some time ago. And after we researched what other municipalities in North Carolina, like Wilmington, Asheville, Blowing Rock, Raleigh, etc., were doing, we realized that none of those ordinances were necessarily a good fit for a town the size of Edenton. And so we were able to reach out to the School of Government and got some terrific help from Rebecca Badgett there, who is now an author, co-author of the book on short-term rentals and regulations of short-term rentals in North Carolina, all over the country, really. They've done a great study on that. Rebecca helped us draft an ordinance, which we then took this spring to the planning board. At the staff level, we went through many revisions until we felt it was time to take it to the planning board. The planning board held three public meetings on the ordinance, and had heard lots of public comment, took that comment very much into account, and made some suggested revisions based on both the public comment and their own deliberations. So the draft that is before you in your packets has seen a lot of eyes, or a lot of eyes have seen it, and a lot of time and effort have been put into those revisions. But ultimately the question before you is whether you feel like it needs further revision, or if it's suitable for adoption at this point, or if there are other questions we might need to pause and get answers to. But my staff report, without belaboring it, just to clarify, it's a recommendation to amend Article 10, permissible uses, and Article 11, supplementary use regulations of the Town of Edenton Unified Development Ordinance, specifically Section 146, Table of Permitted Uses, to allow short-term rental as a permissible use in the R5, R10, R14, R20, R40, and RA residential zoning districts, as well as in the downtown commercial and neighborhood commercial districts. Also, supplementary use regulations to add Section 180.14, short-term rentals. And so that is the attached ordinance to that, the staff report. Currently, our ordinance does not define or regulate short-term rentals in any zoning district. In fact, we don't distinguish rentals versus privately or owner-occupied property. We just say residential, either multifamily or single-family. Article 9 of the town's UDO zoning districts and maps states that the town's residential zoning districts are designed and intended to secure for the persons who reside there a comfortable, healthy, safe, and pleasant environment in which to live, sheltered from incompatible and disruptive activities that properly belong in non-residential districts. Article 9 also indicates that the downtown commercial district is established as a district in which to accommodate a wide variety of commercial activities, particularly those that are pedestrian-oriented, and an intensive development pattern in the town's central business district, and that the neighborhood commercial zoning district is established as a district in which to allow small, limited retail service land uses which provide goods and services primarily to surrounding residential neighborhoods. So, sorry to have to read so much verbiage directly to you, but the requested action would result in the following amendments to the town's UDO. So we would add in Article 10 under the permissible use table, or permitted use table, short-term rental as a category. We would regulate it through a zoning permit, which is staff review, and the ordinance outlines the specific requirements that would be needed to be found to be in place before a zoning permit could be issued. So the alterations to the draft that are included in your packet are shown in strike-through in red text. Initial changes were in yellow. Recent changes are highlighted in green. I say that because some of the public may have a copy that they're looking at as well. As you'll also remember, the North Carolina General Assembly has been contemplating possible legislation related to short-term rentals. This summer there was a good chance that they were going to adopt some legislation that stopped municipal or local regulation of short-term rentals. They've kind of paused on that, but it's possible that it could come up again, and it could be that they exempt those local regulations that are already in place, or they could say that they're unlawful. We just won't know until a little later about that. Staff does recommend approval of the proposed text amendment based on the review of Article 20 amendments, as stated below. As I noted, the Planning Board met in May, June, July, and on August 12th to review and make recommendation on this draft ordinance as proposed by staff. And the board held a public comment at each of these public meetings and made suggested revisions to the proposed ordinance based on those comments in their own deliberations. They unanimously, 5-0, recommended approval of the draft ordinance, but they offered some notes for your consideration. First, there was some concern at one of the public meetings about a short-term rental that had popped up in a neighborhood here in town with a homeowners association. And there was concern about the use of the amenities belonging to the neighborhood and the homeowners association, and these transient rentals using, or renters using, those amenities. The board wondered whether we should add language that stated the stricter of the town regulations or the homeowners association's covenants should apply or should be regulatory. And our town attorney's office said that, or advised us that ordinances should not delve into the covenant consideration business for several reasons, primarily that the town would be entering into a dispute over private agreement between landowners, and that governmental enforcement of private covenants would be risky. So hopefully, if needed, these homeowners associations will update their covenants on their own. Additionally, one of the main concerns that the planning board had was, the council expressly said that you were interested in safety, the safety of these units that were being rented to people coming into Edenton from out of town. Were they as safe as any other units that they might rent that are regulated by the health department or other codes like a hotel or a bed and breakfast? Given that, the planning board was concerned that we have existing short-term rentals that would be grandfathered or considered existing non-conforming situations, and would be allowed to continue without being required to get one of these proposed permits unless they ceased operation for a period of 6 months or more. So you might envision a scenario where a property owner buys a home, is intending to retire to Edenton, uses it as a short-term rental, decides to do all this before any ordinance is enacted, then comes to Edenton and decides that maybe they would really rather, a year later, winter in Florida. And they've stopped for, say, 18 months renting their property, and then they decide to move to Florida in the winters, and during that time, they want to rent it. Well, since they let it lapse for a period of greater than 6 months, they would be required to comply with the ordinance. Otherwise, if it's just rented continuously, it can change ownership, it can change, frequency of rental, but they would not have to come back and apply for a new permit. the planning board asked us to investigate that and whether there was anything that we could do to require existing short-term rentals to have to comply with this new ordinance. Again, we sought advice from the town attorney's office, and it was confirmation of some things that I had thought, that there is a process called amortization whereby you may require a non-conforming use to come into compliance with your new regulations. You guys might be familiar with billboards. There's been some process with that, with non-conforming billboards in North Carolina. But you have to hire an economist to do a study to value the use of that non-conforming use, and then they would provide the council with a time frame over which that value would be recoverable by the property owner. So that would be, we have no idea without the economist doing the study. Could be 6 months, could be 2 years, don't really know, but we'd have to go through the expense of hiring the economist and then writing an amortization schedule and then monitoring how that was carried out.
Elizabeth, excuse me, how is that recovered during that amortization period? I mean,
Basically, it would be the value lost, I guess, and Hood, you can help me with this if you need to, but it would basically be the economist is looking at what the value lost to that property owner by going through the regulatory process would be. In this case, it's a little complicated because we're not saying they can't do it. It's just that they would have to comply with these regulations. In the billboard case, it's obvious because they have to take the billboard down after a certain amount of time. So it's complicated. But basically, he's trying to stretch that loss over that time frame to the 0 point or the equal point. The economist would be, I mean. Does that make sense? As I mentioned earlier, our ordinance does not define residential structures by the occupant. We define it by multifamily or single family, not by owner occupied or renter occupied. Other municipalities, like the city of Wilmington, do define their residential property as by owner or renter occupied. So when the city of Wilmington enacted their short-term rental ordinance, anything that was operating was considered illegal because they did not allow for short-term rentals. They only had a definition of long-term rental or traditional rental and owner-occupied. So they considered anybody that was operating to be non-compliant, and they had to come into compliance with their new ordinance. Our ordinance is not written that way, and so we don't the existing short-term rentals are not considered illegal. They would just be considered non-conforming after the adoption of the ordinance. I apologize for a lot of complicated talk, but would love to point out a few important pieces of the ordinance itself and then take any questions that you have. In particular, the section 4, permit application, some of these different regulations have gotten some attention and raised some questions. The first being that nonconformity issue, which I've already outlined. The second being on page 4, the proof of general liability insurance. And I know that there was debate on the council early on about whether or not that requirement should be in there. The planning board did leave it in and felt like it would be up to the council to deliberate whether that was necessary or if it was even needed. Okay, the next portion that's gotten quite a bit of attention is on page 5 and 6, and it is with regard to the designated responsible party and the requirement that that party, whether it be the owner or someone else in the area, shall reside within 20 miles of the short-term rental property and be available to respond to complaints within 45 minutes of their receipt. We've had some questions from short-term rental owners as to whether they are required to share the name of that responsible party with their renter, or if they only need to share it with the town so that the renter still goes to the owner through Airbnb as the first point of contact in the case of an emergency, and then the owner contacts this responsible party. That would be something, if you think we should clarify it, that potentially is a question. It's not clear. And let's see, the final thing that I think has probably been of concern is regarding the posting on advertisements on online platforms. This is page 7, the last section of the town's noise ordinance rules and regulations and the town of Edenton recycling and trash collection dates. And the question has been raised as to whether we really need them to post that entire section of language in the noise ordinance on their online advertisement, or just some more simple statement about must be compliant with the town of Edenton's noise ordinance. It's required that it's posted both in the unit and on their advertisement, right, as it's written right now. And so those are some of the highlights. I certainly understand if you all have questions of me. Happy to answer them.
Council members, questions of Elizabeth?
I just have a comment to make. I want to thank Elizabeth and the entire planning board for all the hard work on this particular ordinance. I could detect from the August minutes some exasperation by some of your board members, but a good job
Thank you.
doing this. I appreciate it.
And Elizabeth, I think that what I keep hearing is that I think that the ones that don't cause problems are the ones that have people in town that own them. You know, that because there's somewhere to go. I mean, somebody makes noise at Larry's, and I think noise is one of the biggest problems. From so you have your house you've been living in forever, and all of a sudden the house beside you becomes a whole house Airbnb, and every weekend has a different group of people coming in, and it's close. I can see how that's a problem unless there's some type of person that's in charge. So I mean, I think that what I would like to see us do tonight is listen to the public hearing, and then have maybe a little bit more time to try to work through some of these issues.
Elizabeth, I too have a concern with management and control. You know, I'm all for, I like what the Hardings are doing, like what the Sellers are doing. There's somebody there on site managing the particular property. I really have a problem with people renting out a whole house, living in Raleigh or Greenville or what have you, renting to certain people who are going to make noise.
And that is why the language was put in about the designated responsible party. We certainly heard that concern loud and clear, and knew that having someone that could respond quickly was very important. Also, I neglected to mention that I reached out today again to Rebecca Badgett with the School of Government, and she did give us some advice about the question you raised about whole house rental. You're right, we treat them all the same in this ordinance. We made that decision to keep it simple. Again, this was like a year ago when we started, and we've gotten more and more and more rentals. I think we're now up to about 30 in town, short-term rentals that we know about, and more whole house rentals than not are what has popped up. And you would be able to potentially do different things with regard to a whole house rental versus a homestay, or separate residence on the site of a primary residence. You can make distinctions. That's not in this language, and I would think we would need to draft something for you to look at. But it's possible, I guess.
Elizabeth, you know somewhere down the road where the state may say, hey, I'm going to prohibit municipalities from
It could happen
regulating,
anytime.
So we could get something together, and it could be null and void.
It could, and that's part part of me feels like if they did decide to say, if you have an existing ordinance, you may continue to enforce it, that having something is better than having nothing. Of course, they could also say, too bad if you've got one, we're saying you can't have one. So, but there's a conflict there.
And I think we also need to work through who gets called, because if you have a person in charge, then it makes no sense that the next door neighbor doesn't know who to call. I mean, that's the whole point.
I agree with
If
that.
the person was in there, I mean, if somebody makes noise at Larry's, Cliff's gonna call him, and so, I mean, the whole not call somebody 20 minutes away, you don't know their name.
And I think one thing to point out too is in our application requirements, I'm looking for it now, I believe we had a notification requirement, so any new short-term rentals would be required to show that they had notified their neighbors, in other words, that they had notified all the folks all the way around them or within 100 feet that they were intending to apply for this permit. Because I agree with you, the neighbors should be aware of what's going on.
And I think there's a difference in, where my house is and where some other, I mean, some places people are really close together and some places they're much farther apart.
And that is true. We run into a bit of a difficulty because almost all of Edenton proper is zoned either R5 or R10. So the zoning itself is not going to be what enables us to regulate that distance. There may be, and Wilmington does this, a separation requirement, but then you're restricting the number of short-term rentals that could locate on any given block. Like, for instance, in Wilmington, they do 2% per zoning district, residential zoning district, so no more than 2% of the property in any residential zoning district may be a short-term rental. When you reach that cap, you go on a waiting list, and then beyond that, no short-term rental may be within 400 feet of another. So you've got, they're pretty much heavily regulating it. That's an example. I'll answer questions later too.
Okay, thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Good job. Before we open the floor for public comment, I would just like to inform all of you that today, the administrative office, Anne Marie, received letters from 3 individuals who couldn't be here tonight. And those letters will be available to read, and Anne Marie told me that she would have copies if you wanted a hard copy, or be happy to email you a copy from the 3 people who wrote. And those letters came from Cheryl Orr, Don Pearson, and Grant and Kim Anderson. So we have received their comments via, what did they come to you? Email? Yeah. So they are available if you'd like to hear what your other fellow citizens had to say about this process. So with that bit of housekeeping information, I'll open the floor now for public comment. And what we ask is that you take the podium and state your name and address, and we will be happy to hear from you. The floor is open.
I'm Cynthia Harding, and my husband Flint and I reside at 407 Court Street. And we have a short-term rental above our garage. So it's a detached unit, but on our residential property. I, first of all, appreciate all the time and the due diligence that's gone into this whole process. It has been a long time coming, and I understand that. One comment just off the bat, though, about the noise. I don't understand. I do get how you would like to have a contact person, but I don't understand why, if there's a noise problem, the first point of contact isn't the police department. If they're violating the noise ordinance, I think that should be the first point of contact. Then you can figure out, who else, because you want to get the problem stopped. And I understand that. Hopefully there haven't been too many of those. I know we haven't had any noise in our backyard, so I'll tell you that. With regard to the noise ordinance being on the listing, oftentimes there's a big gap between the time someone books a unit and they actually come and stay. It's just like anybody else planning a trip. Sometimes you plan out months in advance. Sometimes it's the week of. I'm not sure if you put too much verbiage on that listing that it's going to be read. So I don't know if that's going to serve your purpose. Same thing with the trash. I can understand how if it's a whole house and there are a lot of people staying in one residence, it becomes more like a beach house rental where people do take trash out multiple times and they need to know the process for that. Our folks don't really handle trash. It's like staying in a hotel. You don't take your trash out when you leave a hotel. You just leave it there, and that's part of the cleaning process. So again, I'm not certain if that's really necessary in all cases or would really serve your purpose to have it on the listing. We certainly can inform our folks inside with the house notes, but I don't know if having it on the listing is going to really serve your purpose. Also, I've heard a lot, my husband keeps reminding me this, people have said, oh, we want to level the playing field between these short-term rentals and the traditional B&Bs or hotels. And what I have said before, and I want to say again and stress, is that when we have guests stay, I ask them, where else did you look? They are typically not looking at the hotels because they want to be in town, or at the traditional B&Bs, often because they want a kitchen or they are bringing a family. And if you go on the websites of any of our traditional B&Bs, I think all of them will say no children. Some it's under 8, some it's under 12. And so if you've got someone traveling with a young child, a B&B is not an option for them. And if they want to stay in town, then they have to look at an Airbnb or a short-term rental. Also, we have people who are coming here to look at Edenton for a place to move, either for retirement or they can work remotely, and they've heard we have a wonderful quality of life here. Those folks like to stay in a neighborhood and see what it's like to live in town. And so I think that the clientele that we have, while we've had fine people, they have a different purpose and a different need out of their stay, and that's why they are drawn to these short-term rentals. So I think that's something to consider as well. And then so far as parking, ours is small, so we don't have an issue with that. We typically have everybody come in one car, so that's not a problem. But it seems to me that if it's a whole house, there's probably as much parking as there would have been when a family lived in that house, so that probably does accommodate as well. So again, I thank everyone for what they've done. I hope that this can be seen with clear eyes and without bias towards traditional B&Bs, because this market that we serve is a valuable one. The people who come here eat in our restaurants. They shop in our stores. I see them loading up bags in the back of their cars. They come to our special events. We're already booked for the Christmas tour. They are contributing in other ways to the town of Edenton. So we hear about the nuisance things, but I want to make sure that everyone knows about the benefits to the town as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next speaker? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor Vaughn. My name is Ann Edwards, and I live at 223 East King Street. And I'm here to talk about the nuisance factor, and I will do that in a way as briefly as I can. And let me just start by saying this. I am not universally anti-Airbnb in our town. I know that I have friends here who have successfully for numbers of years, run Airbnbs here without complaint and beautifully done. And I look at Larry Sellers and Mary Jo. Something I don't know about you, but I'm sure that's true. Ann Rowe is a friend of mine. The thing that has made these Airbnbs successful, in my opinion, is that they all share three things. And these things are very important to me, and I think they should be important to all of you. First of all, they have lots of space around their properties. Second of all, they offer off-street parking. And third of all, they have on-site management. There is someone there all the time to monitor whatever could be wrong that would go wrong. And in my case, I don't have that. And so let me just back up and say that the reason I'm here tonight is to encourage you, to beg you, in fact, to table any consideration that you have tonight about approving any sort of ordinance that now, as it's written, as it's proposed, governs Airbnb rentals in this town. And I look at Elizabeth Bryant. I mean, Elizabeth has been so good to me. We've had conversations about, walnut trees and various things. I look at what Hood Ellis has done. I mean, I know that this ordinance that has been proposed, as it's been revised over and over and over, this problem has been going on since January, or at least maybe even, did you say maybe before, like 2017? There's been conversation that all of you have had to deal with. And believe me, I am sympathetic to you all if you just wanted to say, let's just rubber stamp this thing and go on and pass it on to the next new council. Let's get it over with. We've worked it to death. We've thought it to death. We've done everything that we can to look at all the different nuances that could come up with this thing. Let's just get it over with. I don't blame you for that. But I ask you tonight, please, to know that Edenton is better than that. Edenton is special. And Edenton does not deserve, in my opinion, to have an ordinance that is sort of passed on because God knows we can't figure it out, it's too complicated, to have it turned into every other, and I mean every other, on the globe, internationally, every other city, every other town that has the ability to introduce Airbnb rentals, because there are people who are money grubbing for their own profit, for their own operation of their Airbnbs, and for a town or a city that thinks it can garner a few coins on bed tax or taxpayer visitors' dollars. And I want to tell you why I'm saying all this. Is everybody awake? Are you with me? I mean, get ready for the good stuff, because I'm going to tell you about what my experience has been with the Airbnb. So here we are. Please don't vote on this now. Give yourselves some time to think about what the effect of this is going to be on our special town. I have talked about the importance of the examples with Larry Sellers and Anna Rowe and Ms. Harding about how, they've got three things going for them. I live next door to a house that does not have any of those things going. It is light years away from my experience. The last week in September, a crowd of young people, this is after my house had been sold next door, the house next door to me, and it is 13 feet away from me on East King Street. Many of you have seen it. Many of you who have been over to my house know what I'm talking about. I am like right there. The house next door to me sold. I am the last house at the end of East King Street before you get to Oakham Street, if you're coming down from the old courthouse. The house next door to me was sold to new owners. I never met the new owners. 2 weeks after it's sold, a crowd of young people, and let me just read this, because I'll probably, if I don't, just wander off into the trees to tell you about what my experience was. A crowd of young people and I'm saying I'm 67 now, so virtually everyone is young people to me, but I think this crowd of 6 20-somethings descended on this house next door to me, 13 feet away from me, and proceeded to raise hell all weekend. Pardon my French. I mean, day and night, into the wee small hours of the morning, their behavior, especially the noise, rivaled anything I had ever seen at any of the fraternity parties that I attended in my youth, at various places where I went. And keep in mind, these party hardies are 13 feet away from me. As a friend of mine says, and this is important, and he's a rabid football fan, golly, the space between you and the house next door, it's not enough to make a first down. I thought of calling the police. That's been recommended to me. Call the police, report disturbance of the peace. But I didn't because, for all I knew, these were the children and friends of my neighbors. Not a great way to welcome new folks to the neighborhood, I thought. So I said nothing. But then it happened again. Now keep in mind, I have never met my neighbors. I'm thinking they've got wild guests living next door. I don't want to call the police. But it happens again. This time with a group of 6 older adults who were carrying on, as my grandmother used to say. She would call it cackling and laughing and drinking and smoking. Yes, you can smell the smoke. Until 2:15 a.m. This is on Sunday morning now. This is after an entire weekend of this. And I could really gross you out with multiple details, but I'll just give you one about this crowd of older adults, 6 of them on the screen porch until 2:15 in the morning on Sunday morning, lights on, noise going. There was an elder man in this group, and he had such a bronchial pneumonia, ghastly cough that I would not have been surprised if he had spewed his lungs out on my side yard, 13 feet away, all night long. So, again, for the same reasons, I didn't call the police. It was only on the following day, and here's the punchline, y'all. I had a call from Sambo. And we got back 45 years, and we've worked together for 20 years, and, we talk all the time. And I told him, I thrilled him with stories of the horror of my weekends. And he said, after he paused for a minute, I bet the new owners of the house next door to you have turned it into an Airbnb. The thought had never occurred to me. I had no notice of that. I had no knowledge of it. I had never met them, and he was right. So, to go back to me, standing here, being the canary in the coal mine, the bird that smells noxious fumes and dies to protect the rest of the coal miners, I am telling you, I have had some pretty noxious smells going on. This canary has suffered. But I am not here solely to complain and moan, I promise you. Poor me, I really do feel sorry for myself, my peace of mind, my wonderful neighborhood, my house. Everything has been invaded, everything has been destroyed, and I have no control over that. I'm trying to give you, and I hope I can keep your attention long enough if I haven't lost it already, to give you some ideas of some suggestions about things that can be done to strengthen the proposed ordinance. And as I said, I am not anti-Airbnb. I got Larry over here, I got Ann Rowe, I got Miss Harding. There are things that are good about this. Off-street parking, space around their houses. They have got wonderful on-site management. But what about the rest of us? And this is where I think there's a real problem. So, let me see how we can do something and just make some suggestions that you might want to take in consideration. If you please, do not approve this ordinance right now. I wonder if you could possibly, as town council members, in collaboration with the town attorney, with Elizabeth Bryant and the Planning Commission, with the Board of Adjustments, with all the controls that have been so beautifully put into our town, if you could consider looking at two things: density of population in our neighborhoods and proximity of housing in our neighborhoods. I know Elizabeth has talked about, zoning issues about this. Our neighborhoods are different. Each one of them is different. But if you have a situation, as I do, like East King Street, other streets have this. West Church Street has it. Look at East and West Queen Streets. Look at East and West Eden Streets. If you look at these houses and you see how close they are together and how many people are in these areas. For me, as I keep saying, 13 feet to next door, then I think there needs to be some consideration taken to whether you let an Airbnb come in there. And I would say maybe let's let an Airbnb come in there if there is written permission by the surrounding neighbors, the neighbors surrounding the houses in these dense neighborhoods with great population and close proximity. If there's written permission, okay, fine, let's let them do that. I've talked to my neighbors. I have asked them about what they can do to protect my interests, just my right to have, peace and quiet in my teepee. And I believe that I can work with them. I want to work with them. But that question remains: should every citizen in our town be forced to have the responsibility to go individually to its neighbor and say, golly, you got this Airbnb moving in here and it's making a lot of noise and giving me trouble. Should I be forced to negotiate that? Is that fair? I don't think so, and I don't think you all would think that was true. Second, let's talk about parking. Parking, as I said with our good neighbors here, they have off-street parking. Hey, that's great. But in our crowded, populated, densely built together neighborhoods, parking comes at a premium. Given the narrow nature of so many of our streets, and again, the density of population, especially in the historic district, simply driving the streets can be like managing an obstacle course. Why not, and here's a solution, why not follow the example of Virginia Beach and make parking on street by Airbnb visitors prohibited? Why not make them, Airbnb visitors, go and park in the ample parking lots that we have that are for public use, like the parking lot behind the shops on Broad Street or the vacant church parking lots around? Why not make them move so that those of us who try to park will actually have a parking space? And this leads to another question I have, and I really want you all, or these people who are thinking about this ordinance, can you restrict the type of vehicle that is allowed to park on the street? Here's my experience last weekend. This is after talking to my next door neighbors with the Airbnb. They live in Greenville, by the way. They are not here. I looked out and I had a big yellow Penske rental truck that was parked in front of my house, taking up 2 parking spaces on the street. I was told that these were filmmakers who were coming to do a documentary in Edenton. I met them on the sidewalk. Nice guys. They were here from upstate New York. They were saying that I asked them what their subject was, thinking maybe it'd be something cool, that they could do as a film or a documentary about Edenton and how beautiful it is and what the history is. No. They were here on a commercial venture with a big truck in my front yard, and they were here to do a documentary about the ineptitude of the penal system in northeastern North Carolina in the wake of the murders that have happened of all the COs, correctional officers, that were in, the poor woman who was killed in Bertie County in the jail, and the numbers of people who were killed in Pasquotank. These people could not even pronounce Pasquotank County and asked me for that. So there's another question. We're talking about parking. Well, do we want to have Airbnbs made available for commercial use? I just ask you to consider this. Oh, golly, let me keep on going unless you're going to, bring the vaudeville, hook in here and haul me off. If we don't have commercial use, if we still have people who are here on the Airbnb, if we can go ahead and say, yeah, we can require we can prohibit on-street parking, we can consider density and population, we can consider on-site management and require that, which I think has got to be a thing. But here's some more things to think about in a broad picture, and I will be very brief about this. I ask you to think about this. It's very important. Where is your control? Where do you have control anymore over anything that the Airbnb has to present to you? Airbnb is what I call a thing. It is something out here that exists on the internet. It is not a local entity. It is not a person that you can look at and talk to, as you can if you're talking to someone from the Historic Preservation Commission or the Board of Adjustments or the Planning Commission or the town. You do not have access to Airbnb. Airbnb, its contract is exclusively with the homeowner. So here you have this thing that lives somewhere on the internet, and you have the homeowner here. In between, there is no local control. So what do you do when you engage Airbnb? Do you cut out all that local control? My suggestion is that you do, and that's a liability. The further liability to me is, where is your enforcement? And this goes back to the on-site management. If you are a person and you have an Airbnb, you can write house rules out the wazoo. You can say no smoking on the back porch, no noise after, 10 o'clock. But if there's nobody there to enforce it, who cares? What happens to the rest of us who live here next door to this chaos that I've described to you when there is no control by local management, when there is no enforcement of these so-called house rules? Let me ask you this. Where is your conscience? And this is very important to me. By this I mean, how dare this town expect me and others like me as long-term property tax paying citizens of this town, how dare you ask me to sacrifice my parking spaces, to sacrifice my peace of mind, my no noise, in favor not just of these visitors who are next door, but these people who own this and don't even live here. What happens if you've got a remote owner of an Airbnb? Mine live in Greenville. They can use Edenton as a money-making venue. I have asked them, I have said, okay, you tell me you're coming here. Please come to Edenton. We love Edenton. It'll be a wonderful place for you to retire. You'll be my next door neighbor. How lovely. Had them over for lunch, did everything. I'm looking at them and they're going, well, we think we're going to retire here, but, we really aren't sure, and it's going to be at least 5 years out. Meanwhile, they're out of town. They don't even live here, but they are clocking in $175 a night, packing 6 people into 1,500 square feet that include 3 bedrooms. Just think about this, with 3 beds in each bedroom, and they are away. So, Edenton, is it for sale? Is it for sale against those of us who live here and love it? So I thought, okay, fine. We've got these people who want to come in here and capitalize on Edenton that's for sale as a cash cow. Why don't they just, wouldn't it be easier? Because I know managing an Airbnb is not fun. Wouldn't it just be easier if they turned these houses into like full-time rentals? Most of us have full-time rentals. I do. I mean, I've had Chick Pierce in my cottage for 10 years. I've had Carla Hoffner in there for 5 years. And I thought, well, no, duh. They can't make the same amount of money on a full-time rental that they can by packing people back to back. And I believe believe me, I have looked at the calendar for my next door neighbor. They are booked all through the holiday season. Back to back, $175 a night, crowded people coming in there. They're going to make so much money, and I am not going to have a happy holiday season. So, is that what you want? Edenton for sale? Give up your control? Lack your enforcement? What can you do? I'm sorry, I can get very emotional about this, and I promised everybody that I wouldn't, but, where's your conscience about those of us who've lived here forever, who have invested in Edenton, who pay our property taxes, who try to obey the rules of local control? Are you going to just throw that away and allow people to come in here who don't even live here and make money off of your town? Is that what you want? I don't think so. Other question I have is, what are you doing to your local hospitality situation? I mean, what about the inns, the bed and breakfast, the hotels that have been here forever? And I know that you talked about this a little bit, Miss Hardy. But let me tell you, I heard that on the corner of Granville and Queen Streets, a house has been bought by an off-campus person, and maybe he has Edenton roots, I don't know, to turn it into use exclusively for an Airbnb. Well, whoop-de-doo. Catty-cornered across the street at Granville and Queen, there is a Granville Queen Inn where a gentleman has worked for a long time to maintain it. I don't know what his fortunes were for, or anyway. He's going out of business. So, fine. But if you have got the big groups that we have coming into Edenton, as they do for the Christmas tour, for the pilgrimage, for the easels in the garden, all of which I participate in and open my house to. If you've got these people, I doubt that these large groups of nice groups are going to be happy to be squashed in to some Airbnb randomly managed by out-of-town people all over our town. I think it's wrong. So I've said enough. I will end by saying, let's think about some other things. What about crime? Have you considered crime? I mean, we already know that there have been 5 people murdered in an Airbnb in San Francisco. What about fraud? We already know that Airbnb has even identified that there are people who call up Airbnb and say, oh, we want to list our property, and we want to collect money, and we want you to advertise it, and we want you to, give us the insurance for it, and there is no Airbnb. There is no facility. There is not a building there. We also know that by Airbnb, if you are an unscrupulous Airbnb operator, that you have the right to cancel at the last minute anything that anybody is already booked to have you do. My personal experience has been with a wedding party in Nantucket where they went 25 people to go to their Airbnb, and they got there and they were canceled out. They were not allowed to come in. So, do you want to deal with this? I hope not. I hope that you will give yourself some time to consider all this and take into consideration what can be done that may be more fair to our town. Please don't make Edenton, like every other town on the planet, grubbing for Airbnb dollars. Don't drive your tax-paying residents away. Don't destroy the existing hospitality industry. Don't put yourself at risk for the invasion of your own neighborhood, because what I've described to you about my experience, it can happen to you. Don't lose control of your means to maintain the beauty and character of our town. Edenton is a rare bird. My canary's dead. I've told you it has breathed the noxious fumes of what can happen with Airbnb. But Edenton remains a rare bird. Don't kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ann. Does anyone else would like to speak tonight? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and thank all of you for, who participated for doing so. And Town Council, back at you. What is your pleasure relative to the item that's before you as it relates to the ordinance in its present state?
It sounds like to me we got some work to do as far as whole house versus auxiliary. I think that's seems to be the issue that I keep hearing. So
I think there's several issues that need to be taken up that were even mentioned by Ms. Edwards that we really need to look into closely. I personally go along with possibly tabling this particular ordinance right now and give us some time to study. We got 2 new councilmen coming on board. I mean, let's try to get them up to speed on the entire issue. So I'd like to make a motion that we just table it.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table the ordinance that was presented tonight by our staff as it is written for further review and comment by the Town Council. You're not suggesting we send this back to planning board, are you?
Not right now.
Okay, good.
No, they have worked, they worked hard on
Yes.
this.
They've laid, yeah. How many ways can you say the same thing, right? Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Mayor, can I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
ask for staff for us, our assistance in helping us do additional research? The council's asking us to look at regulations pertaining to whole house rentals. And then,
Yeah, because I think that the ones that, and I don't mean whole house auxiliary structure. I mean, I think that we need to look at just a great, like Cynthia, the Hardings, Hood and the Thomases all of a sudden decided to have 6 bedrooms on each side. That's different than them having 1 bedroom in the middle. I mean, in their little auxiliary structure. I think we have to look at it
And
like every house could be.
I think we need to look at on-site management.
Yeah.
If not on-site, at least within the community.
Yeah, I think there's a difference
Control.
in
I mean, I
local
think that's
owners
important,
and,
yeah.
and non-local owners.
Is this something that we can try to do this year, or are we gonna table it to next year?
Let's hope we wouldn't get
That would be your pleasure. When you would like, I think there's staff work to be done, so it might take a while to address some of the concerns that you all have just voiced. So,
and Mayor, Elizabeth just reminded me that if we have revisions or additional amendments, it would fall under the rules and
4
regulations
times a
of
year.
how you amend the UDO. So the earliest would be February?
If it's a non-emergency.
Non-emergency.
We feel like it's an emergency, we can do it before.
I just think we need to get it right. if we're
Yeah, I
gonna
do
it.
too. But in the meantime, the state could come back
Yeah, they
and
can
prohibit.
take it out of our
Yeah.
hands.
okay, the motion's been made, seconded, and discussed. Any further comments? Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no? All right, it's on the table.
She got you off the hook, Bob. We're on the hook.
Second public hearing we have tonight is, I will let Anne Marie explain that because it's more technical than what we've just been discussing. So, Anne Marie, if you would, please.
Yes, Mayor. We have advertised for the council to conduct a public hearing tonight for the purpose of reviewing and assessing the performance of the town's Jimbo Jumbo's Economic Development Program. And this project was financed with $520,433.75 of funds received from a community development block grant which represented 100% of the total program cost that the town received from the North Carolina Department of Commerce Rural Economic Development Division. With these funds, the town installed 2,500 lineal feet of three-phase electrical reconductoring, replaced 18 existing 40-foot poles with 18 new 45-foot poles, installed 7 new 45-foot poles, and a three-phase conductor. The funds also paid to install 4,000 lineal feet of a 10-inch water line and 2,400 lineal feet of an 8-inch water line. And these improvements to the town's water and electrical system allowed for an expansion of jimbo jumbos that created 82 new full-time jobs, with 70 of these jobs, which equates to 85%. 85% of those jobs were filled with persons of prior low and moderate income status. The mayor's going to open up the floor for public comment, and then after the public hearing, the council will be asked to consider adopting a resolution closing out the project, and then also a motion closing out the project ordinance. And I did want to just say that this infrastructure improvement not only allowed for $20 million of building and equipment to be added to the tax base from Jimbo's, but this expansion, this infrastructure also allowed for Regulator Marine to complete a $7 million expansion that created 64 new manufacturing jobs. And Colony Tire is getting ready to, I think they have broken ground on their second expansion. Both of those expansions will represent an $8.3 million investment in building and equipment and 40 new jobs. In addition to the infrastructure upgrades that the town managed, the Edenton Chowan Partnership donated 8 acres of land that it had obtained from the old Fisher Nut company, which without that land, Jimbo's would not have been able to expand. And then our partnership with DOT, who upgraded and strengthened Peanut Drive to be able to support all the additional truck traffic that is being generated. So it's a great story. I think the council deserves tremendous credit for the work that it did to ensure that this expansion of infrastructure could take place, because I think it has truly solidified Peanut Drive as a important major manufacturing industrial park in the region. So Mayor, if you want to open the public hearing, or if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer.
Yeah, anything up here first? Questions? Okay, hearing none, the floor is now open for anyone to speak relative to the community development program that Anne Marie just described and its effect on our ability to grow our local businesses as they have done so amazingly well in recent years to warrant that kind of expansion. So if anybody has anything they'd like to say, please take the podium and give us your name. We'd be happy to hear from you. Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Town Council, we've got 2 items here to deal with. The adoption of the development program closeout resolution is the first. I'd entertain a motion that we adopt that resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt. Questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no? All right, that one passes. Thank you. And second, adoption of the community development program closeout grant project ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, good, thank you. Questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no? Very good. All right. That was a very successful infrastructure development that we were able to offer our expanding industrial community out there. It's amazing. Moving now to committee reports for this evening. We have 3 committees to hear from, beginning with administrative, and that's chaired by Councilman Biggs. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. We only have 4 items on the agenda tonight, and it should be fairly easy to get through. Recommended council approve the covenants for properties that town acquired within the North Oakland Street, Mosley Street neighborhood redevelopment zone as presented. And I will put that in a form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the covenants for our neighborhood redevelopment zones. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Hallelujah.
Yes, very nice.
Yes.
All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no?
Number 2 is recommended council contribute $500 towards the purchase of a marker in the memory of Thomas and crowd of patients. They were runaway slaves from Edenton who enlisted and served in the Union Army, and this will be over on the cemetery in on Martin Luther King Street Avenue. I'll put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to make the contribution toward the purchase of the marker. Questions or comments?
I just want to say, I hope this is the beginning of doing a lot of marking of places that are important to the African-American history in Edenton. I'm all for that and think we need to, this is a great opportunity. I'm glad we're doing this, and I just want to keep on, there's a lot more we need to do.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Thank you.
Recommended council approve the 2019 records retention schedule as presented, and before I put that in the form of a motion, Tammy did go to the little class that she was going to, and everything that we had in our packet was what it should be. So I'll put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further questions, comments? All
Just,
in favor?
is a shredding machine, you have a shredding truck coming anytime soon?
Friday?
Friday, okay, I knew you mentioned, okay.
Okay.
Gonna be busy? Yeah. Okay, I thought so.
Very exciting.
Further questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, thank you.
Okay, and last but not least, it is recommended council approve the pre-employment physical and non-emergency on-job injury agreement with Vidant Medical. And from the best I can understand, our attorney has looked that over and is in favor that we go with this with Vidant Medical. So I will put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to the pre-employment physical and non-emergency agreement with Vidant Medical. Questions, comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, no? All right, that one carries as well.
That's all we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Moving now to the Finance Committee, and that'd be chaired by Councilman Dixon, please.
Well, I have 2 things on tonight. The first one is going to make all those people that are ready to have our streets repaved, the second phase of that, happy. So we're going to recommend that council approve the budget ordinance for street repairs and resurfacing for phase 2 as presented, and I'll put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second.
Does this look like it's gonna be around April, March or April, or May,
Yes.
that period of time?
Yes, we're opening bids Thursday, so
Okay.
we'll know a lot more
Good.
on Thursday.
And there will be a list with that also of the streets, so the public will know, right? Okay.
And have you had a lot of interest?
I don't know. I'll ask Derek from the Wooten Company, how many bidders he expects. Yeah.
Because you gotta have 3
Yeah.
first time around.
All right, any further questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, that carries.
And our second thing on, it's recommended that the council approve the amendment for the improvements to the wastewater treatment capital project budget ordinance as presented. And I'll put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. That was a second.
Second.
Further questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, thank you.
That wraps up the finance committee.
Thank you, sir. New business, Anne Marie, resolution.
You skipped me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Went right by the utilities.
I'm in a hurry to get out of here too. We got 2 items, Mayor.
Sorry about that, Councilman.
That's okay. It is recommended that the council approve the grant administrative service agreement for the Peanut Drive Paradise Road Industrial Development Fund project as presented. I put that in the motion.
Second.
Motion and a second for the resolution relative to the drinking water revolving loan fund.
I'm sorry, I was talking to the Paradise Road, Peanut Drive, Paradise Road.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got way ahead of myself.
You still,
I tried again.
You're still trying to get rid of me, ain't you?
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
Second
Motion
item,
carried.
it is recommended that council approve the amendment to engineering service agreement for the 2018 wastewater treatment plant improvement project as presented. I put that in the form of a motion.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second for the services agreement as presented. Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Okay. Thank you, sir.
I'm through, sir.
Yeah. I appreciate your indulgence in my oversight.
That's okay.
All right. Moving now to new business. Anne Marie, if you would, tell us
Sure.
about the resolution.
Well, Mayor, the council and the staff, we have been working on phase 2 of our water supply upgrade program. And as you know, we received approval last year for a $1.3 million low-interest loan from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. We had to go before the Local Government Commission to get that debt approved. That was approved in October. Is that when we went to the LGC, Virginia? I can't remember when we went. September or October? October. And the LGC authorized the town or approved the town for entering into the loan agreement with the state. And so we filed all that paperwork, and the division has submitted a final offer and a resolution that they're asking the council to approve. This low-interest loan will pay for the rehabilitation of our 4 existing deep water wells, will pay for the construction of a 500,000-gallon new finished water ground storage tank that will be located at the Beaver Hill water treatment plant, and then also construct a new high-service pump. And we're really excited. We're going to finish up our Beaver Hill and Freemason water treatment plants and roll right into phase 2. So if you all would consider adopting the resolution, then we'll get the mayor to sign all the paperwork and send it back to DEQ.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions of what you just heard? Okay, Chair would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second to do so. Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All right, we'll send it away. That's good stuff as well. Okay, council members. items timely and important. You have anything you want to share with us tonight?
Mayor, has the Glover team, do they have any timelines or when they plan to meet with the Board of Adjustment and the Historical Preservation Commission?
I was asked to reach out to the architect to see how we can assist with the next step of the Board of Adjustment. The architect did ask Mr. Glover to arrange for the interior of the building, all the walls that were put in and improvements that were made when the building was upfitted back in 1996. So Mr. Glover has contracted with Dawson Tyler to do that work, and that work is underway, all the demolition. The architect wants to be able to see the whole interior of the building without any of the new improvements so that he can begin his design.
Gotcha.
I'll try to get an update on the timeline for you, but I imagine it's going to be many months for the planning and design phase. But we'll keep you posted.
Gotcha. The other issue, just any further update, we talked about this a month ago on the Hinton Hotel. Any new news?
Mayor, do you want to?
The Hinton Hotel project has hit a snag. The state of North Carolina is being audited by a source, and I quite frankly, I can't remember what it was, but anyway, it has to do with the implementation and use of certain types of tax credits. And that has put up a cautionary red flag throughout the fruited plain, whereby people who are contemplating doing projects in North Carolina using that particular type of tax credit are backing away. In the case of Saga, they have a tax credit investor in Virginia who's been patiently waiting for them to bring a bank on to the playing field, which they did. They got they got a proposal from the bank, which they submitted to the tax credit holder for his satisfaction, and everything looked good. And then all of a sudden, that news, and it really wasn't news because I think it's been in the marketplace for a number of months. And so anyway, it put the brakes on there. But Bob Hauser, who's been the point guy for us on this thing for these several years, was going to go up the ladder a little bit and talk with some tax attorneys in D.C. that he's worked with in the development of this financial package. But we hadn't heard anything. Have you heard anything from him since?
No, we're trying to schedule a conference call.
Okay, but that's it right now. So
Thank
you. After all the effort and frustrations that they dealt with, they hit a snag that was completely out of their control. So that's that. Anyone else have anything from here?
Mayor, I've got one thing. I was at a wedding a couple of weeks ago, and it came up, and it's been coming up for a long time. Councilman-elect High and I have talked about this on several occasions over the years. It seems like we can't get a handle on our problem down here at the park. And, you know, with our employees, pardon the expression, getting the crap beat out of him. And I had a call today from Plymouth. There was a lady that was here within the last couple of weeks, and she encountered the same thing with older teenagers that shouldn't be, you know, in the park, swinging and playing and all this other stuff on the equipment that is designed for 12 years old and under, and she had her 4-year-old with her, and be quite honest, felt very uncomfortable. And so, long and short, I promised I would bring it up tonight, or I promised I'd bring it up at our next meeting after having several conversations. And I just think it's something this council, you're gonna have to get a hold of. I mean, if it's already interrupting people that are coming in from out of town and someone spoke tonight to spend their money here, that's the last thing we would want. I feel pretty confident about it, so. Promised I would, and I've done it.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. In light of what you just described and the incident that just kind of brought it all to a head, I was out walking around trying to get some exercise after my surgery and walked into the park area, and I saw grown plus 12 teenagers in the swings and carrying on, that sort of thing. So it needs some monitoring better than what it's getting right now.
And then we had signage there, but apparently.
Signage, I
but
saw the
it's not being
sign,
addressed
12
yet.
and under.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted to make sure in my mind anyway that it was highly visible, and it is.
Well, I mean, it was bad enough that we had an employee
Yes.
Right.
that was beat up, but I'd sure hate for someone else. I mean, I hate it for McCoy, but I would sure hate it for someone else to happen if they had a child with them.
Do we need to have adult swings?
No.
Okay, I was just one.
I mean,
Separate swings, I don't know.
That was quick, but it's a playground for children.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
adults can get on the pedals over there and get some exercise
Okay.
while they watch their kids. That's my take, but anyway, thank you for that. Anybody else from this side? Floor is open to anyone remaining who would like to bring something to the attention of the town council. We'd be happy to hear from you. All we have is employees and newly electeds in the audience, so I guess we're done. All right, thank y'all very much. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moving.
And we are. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.